Hey, Krista, it is so great to see you again.
It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, we met at Regold's dance conference, which was so awesome down in Las Vegas. 3 days of dance school owners coming together, talking business, talking program, all sorts of interesting stuff. And it was really good. We had a few hours together at one of the sessions that we did and reached out and said, hey, listen, would you like to come on the show? It's been a while since I've had some guests on the show, and I want to reopen this door. And, as I said before we hopped on, you're my guinea pig here, Krista. Jump back in because we're going to do a little live coaching today and, get some ideas out around your business and how you want to structure your business moving ahead. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your business, how you got here, and just give us a little sort of 30-second, 1 minute background on how you got to sit in the seat that you're sitting in right now.
Okay, so I'm Krista Fairchild. I own Energy Arts Dance in Marysville, Ohio. It's a little suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. And this is our 33rd season of dance. My mom started the business in 1990, so I am a second generation owner. And I started teaching for her right out of college and bought this studio in fall of 2019. So my first full year of business was COVID. This will be my 5th year. We expanded into a second location in our town. So we have grown quite a bit since 2020, which is good. I have 9 employees and one of them is my mom.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to kind of learn more about how to strategize so that I'm not making every decision in the business daily, but to empower my employees to start in that leadership kind of role. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And this is pretty much what we talk about all the time on the Business Owner Breakthrough, which is why I thought it'd be good to just have a live conversation around it. As I do a lot of work with people who are transitioning from, we call it next generation. So the next generation, like yourself, taking over. And, not always do we have, even whether the next generation is taking over from your own parents, or whether, like in most people that are listening to the podcast here know that we have shoe stores. Well, I took over from an existing business owner, a couple of these shoe stores, 2 out of 3 that I took over from existing businesses, and one that I just opened myself. But there's differences there. And when we put our own leadership spin on things and we have the clarity of what we want out of this, there's process, there's communication, there's accountability, there's things that change. And one of the things I'm seeing a lot with these days is that this generation who are taking over business as baby boomers are leaving businesses in droves these days, don't necessarily want to run business the way they did. And there's so much out there now to help us, right? All the different process management tools and tips and computerized things that give us our time back. And what I find with a lot of owners is that even though they have expedited a lot of this stuff through point of sale systems and communication systems and a lot of these things that do give you your time back, you don't actually take the time, right?
Right.
You just reallocate it into more things to do.
Right.
And
that's true.
It's really interesting when you reached out and you said, I want to start to have some other people rise in the ranks. And do you have, Krista, especially now with this new opening, because you can't be in 2 places at once. It's now physically impossible for you to make every decision. And physicality of that sometimes is needed, because one of the things I'll recommend to a lot of when they're looking at starting to release some of the accountabilities is that ask your team, if I wasn't here, what would you do?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Now you can live it because you've got 2 locations, right? But even for those that are listening that only have one business or one location and you're there most of the time, if you're thinking these questions around this idea around like, they should know what to do now. They've been with me for 6 years or 3 years or 10 years, whatever the case is, or your mom's case, she founded it. She should know what to do. Why is she asking me this? Like, you could say, well, what would you do if I wasn't here today, if I was away on vacation, or if I was at the other location, or whatever the case is? And here's the hard part, is sitting and waiting for them to answer. It's super hard. Yeah. It's that pregnant pause that you have to wait for them to come up with their answer. And I think the biggest thing around that is don't cave in Just wait for them to answer, because 90% of the time, if they know your promise and they understand what you're all about and they've been with you that long, they already have the answer.
Right.
The difference is, for a lot of small business owners, is they haven't actually allowed them and given them the authority to make it. So when we look at the transfer of accountability, and because you were at one of or a couple of the different things that I put on, but the idea of having an accountability chart, and for those of you who are listening,
Right.
an accountability chart looks on paper similar to a organizational chart, but the idea around accountability chart is really, what are the accountabilities, not just the titles, but what are you responsible for? And when you start thinking about this stuff from your business, like, give me one of the accountabilities that you would like to shed, and that you think, and you don't have to give me a name of who it's going to, but you're thinking right now, this person could probably do this.
Right. So one of the systems that we'd like to put into place is kind of a head over each of our departments, like preschool, our competitive team, recital program. And so one of those would be responsible for all the curriculum and the themes each month for preschool classes. And right now I basically have done all those, but I know I have identified employees that I think would be really good in those roles. And now it's just a matter of getting over the worry, I think.
Right. And
because my mom always did it all. So I sometimes feel a little bit of that pressure to do that.
And guilt.
Even though I don't know that I'm not the one.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily the one that might be the best one for that either.
That's an interesting piece right there, because we aren't our parents.
Right.
And we aren't our previous business owners. If we bought your business from somebody else, they may have had specific, unique qualities, and they did have specific, unique qualities that made them different than you. And that's okay. And they may have had a different outlook on what they wanted out of their business and their life. And that's okay. And I think when I look at this stuff, Krista, because you took over this business, you bought this business from your mom. Not only because there's some legacy there and it's family and all that kind of stuff, but because you thought it would bring you a better life, right?
Yeah.
It's like this. I do have an option of going to work for somebody,
right?
But when you think about that, and sometimes we reel back to 2019 before all the COVID mess and all of that sort of stuff, when that wasn't even in the picture. Sometimes we need to roll back to when we first got into business and think a little bit around the fact that, hey, if I buy this business off my mom or off whomever, what will this bring me and my family? What kind of freedoms am I looking for? And those freedoms, like I said, are a lot of times different for this generation than they maybe were for the generations before us. And that's okay. Right. And so, but with clarity, what does that look like? And I think doing some journaling on that kind of stuff is really, really interesting, because it'll help you guide you through some of these accountabilities that you want to set up with all the different structures within your dance school. And within the two different dance store, like the dance studios, right? You've got two different ones, and there's going to be people involved in those. But the next piece of that is, do you have clear and effective process in place so that because one of the words you used was trust. I'm not sure whether I'm ready to release, which a lot of people will say, I don't trust them quite yet. But a lot of times around the trust idea, it's not necessarily do we trust the people, it's around do we trust the process.
Right.
And so when we look back at taking that up a step, that step is, I really need to hone down this process so that I feel confident that I can just hand it over, and knowing what they know and knowing that they're part of the culture and all that kind of stuff. Because most of the people that work for us, let's face it, get that side of it. If they don't, they shouldn't be working with us. But, so what is it that holds you back from releasing, do you think, Krista?
I do think that it's probably not having a process in place in a lot of those that will allow me to, and I definitely trust the employees in place. But it's more like my worry and fear of, and I need to get over that. But that it may not happen just the way I pictured it in my head. But honestly, the big picture of it is, it doesn't have to look like what I think it needs to look like, because they may do it in a totally different way. And I'm always surprised, because some of my employees, when we do some of these kind of future, like visionary things, they'll come up with things that it has never even occurred to me to look at it the way they look at it.
Isn't that the best? I love it.
Is. And I think that that's why, because we have the people in place, now I need to get myself on track to give them more responsibility, because I think that that will be more fulfilling to them as well, so that they have a little bit of vested interest in that instead of.
I love that you just said that, because it's my feeling that our employees do want to take ownership in parts of their job, and that does help them, the whole culture, the whole belonging. Your team will notice it. Your students will notice it. I mean, everybody notices that when that's sort of the culture of everybody's in. And,
Right.
The biggest thing with this kind of stuff, I find, Krista, is that a lot of times people procrastinate because they find that it's just too overwhelming to start releasing. So one of my suggestions to you for this upcoming season, because as we're recording this, September is pretty close now.
Yes.
So for this upcoming season is, what are one or two small things that you can release as opposed to the bigger things? And we often, as business owners, think about, oh, I just need to get rid of this big thing and I'll be good. But it doesn't always, that's the hard stuff. So start with something that's maybe a bit smaller, as opposed to releasing, let's say costuming or something like that. It's like, that's a big one, right? What are two or three of the small things that are on your accountability plate right now that you do think you have processed pretty good, but you might need to tweak it just a little bit to finish it off for you to feel confident about, I can hand this over now. And then when you're handing it over, people learn in different ways. So you're handing them the process essentially, and that should be in sort of a written format of some sort of way of, this is the process, this is the way. And then if you can, in a video format is really good for a lot of people. Learn better on video than they do reading something. And then of course the training side of things when you're training them along the way. But once you have some of this process piece in place, then you as the business owner, even if they get this stuff 80% right, you're releasing 80% of that accountability that used to be 100% yours. And the coaching moments for you are that other 20%, right? And so if you need to tweak the process a little bit because it wasn't perfect, you tweak it with that other 20% of your time. You have a conversation with whomever is now accountable on that particular piece of the puzzle, that program, that, whatever it is, whether even down to answering the phone or doing the book work or doing the marketing or the Instagram or any of this other stuff. It's like, this is the way. And if you veer out of that way, then we need to have a conversation, but you as the owner come in, that's where you have the conversation, as opposed to you trying to dream everything up and do everything and be accountable for everything. And everybody else is sitting there twiddling thumbs because you're making all the decisions and they actually want it. Right?
Yes.
So from this side of things, if we pull it into this new season, what do you think are probably the two things that are low-hanging fruit that are like 90% ready, but you haven't actually pulled the trigger on yet to release accountability so that you can free up some of your time?
That's a great question. I think probably the ones that were closest to, and honestly could do it pretty much like this week if we needed to. And so I've just recently put my first employee on a salary, which was a big step. And so I have one now on salary, which is awesome. And she's the one that will then take on some of this responsibility.
Yeah, that's great.
But probably the monthly curriculum and themes and oversight into our two bigger programs, which is our preschool program and then our primary program. So those 5 to 8 year olds. And so the planning of all that and then the implementation, and that honestly is just, I have been holding off on it just for time issues, thinking that I don't have time to really put the process in place. But I think just after hearing you talk, it could be even just a month long, we put it on a paper and then I kind of mentor that for a month or two, just making sure that our boxes are getting checked. And then I think it will be able to flow great soon after that.
So
actually, it probably would flow fine without me just right this second.
Okay. In 15 minutes, we're releasing some accountability here, right? And so this is what the goal is, Krista. So
Mhm.
as we wrap this sort of conversation up, my goal for you today is to spend the next half an hour and write down how this can actually transfer for this season, not for a season in the future. This season's
Yeah.
happening now.
Whether we
And
like it or not.
right. And for you, when you look at, if you don't do this now, you've got another
Mhm.
season to wait.
That is so
And
true.
and so I want to raise the sort of fire a little bit here in your gut to say, I
Mhm.
want to try this. I want to actually do this, especially now that you have a salaried employee. This is a great
Mhm.
opportunity to make this happen. And this is one of those low hanging fruits that you're almost there, but it's been sitting there for such a long time. And my suggestion to
Mhm.
you is you need to find the time to finish this so that you can release it, because it will never be there. Time is always taken up by the daily events of life.
Right.
So, and if you ever want more time, you need to do even more of this kind of work so that
Right.
you can release more accountability and live the way you want to live. And especially now that you have 2 stores, you can't be at 2 places at once.
Right.
So when you have 2
Yeah.
locations, it's impossible. And if the process around that, and if there isn't clarity in the communication of who owns what pieces of these 2 locations, and who do I go to
Mhm.
as a junior staff member, who do I go to when I have a problem? And what is
Right.
the system of communication, and how can I get my answer? Then
Mhm.
these are where our customers feel pain. These are the
Yeah.
areas, right? Then customers are let down because nobody else has the answers for stuff that needs to be answered. And as you start rolling through some of these minor process pieces, you're going to feel the excitement about what else can I offload. And I think
That's true.
that's fun. You know, when you start thinking to yourself, who else can do this? Because
Mhm.
we talked about the fact that they do want to do it. Most of them do.
Yeah.
And it's super fun. So will you commit? And I'd like to follow up with you. Would
Yeah.
you commit to saying, I'm going to get this done for this season, and I'm going to coach this new person that has the accountability as the owner of the business, as opposed to take on this accountability this season?
Yeah. I do want to
Cool.
commit to that for sure. Yeah.
Good. I mean, I'm excited for you, because as you start moving through this journey of accountability, you know, communication process and accountability, the CPA that we talk about a lot, it becomes really engaging, not only for you, because you can start seeing other things out there that you never thought you had time or the energy or the passion for, because you were
Right.
down in the decisions, the smaller level decisions in your business. Now, as you move up that totem pole, you can look at some of these bigger things, and other people are moving up too, and that's exciting for them.
Mhm. Lots of
Sense?
growth for them too.
For
Yeah.
sure. Everybody wants to grow in their business, right?
Yeah.
In their job, and we want to feel as though we're contributing, making a go at whatever it is we do. We want to feel that passion and that reward, or else people tend not to stay.
Yeah.
And as small business owners, we need people to stay.
Yes.
We want them to,
They're the
right?
most important part of
For
the
sure.
puzzle.
I mean, the right people anyway.
Right.
Yeah. Krista, do you have any last minute sort of findings? What was your biggest takeaway here today?
Definitely, besides the fact that it's time to do it, is that I'm just not devoting the time to actually put it in place. And I think that that's sometimes one of the hardest things about being a small business owner. You tend to be super busy, so you don't devote the time that you
Mm-hmm.
should devote, and then it just becomes excuses. And I usually try to do some self-focused things, like, what am I actually falling down in my business, like constructive criticism type
Yeah.
of things. Am I really too busy to do that, or do I just not want to spend the time that it takes to put it in place?
Yeah.
And that for me is for sure one of my weaknesses.
And
So
you
yeah,
know
that's
what?
my biggest takeaway.
I think the biggest thing there too is when we
Mhm.
understand, and I don't even call it weakness really. It's just the way you are. And,
Right.
you know, and we are who we are, and that's okay. But understanding
Mhm.
who we are and allowing ourselves some grace around that is okay. But there's also time where we
Yeah.
just have to get to it, right? And
And
I love
realize
that.
it and just
Yeah,
do it.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's been cool.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for spending some time with me here on the Business Owner Breakthrough today. I've enjoyed our conversation and would love to follow up with you here in the near
for
future to
sure.
see how the season's going, how the accountability is going, and we'll touch
Yeah.
base in the near future.
I really appreciate the opportunity and thank you so much for all your time. I definitely want to touch base.
Cool. Make it a great day. We'll talk soon.